This is better than a booster, a series where I recommend budget commander cards that cost less than a booster pack, usually $5 or less. With the loss of draft boosters, play boosters are now more expensive, but I'm still going to try and keep these below the $5 mark. And let's start with a card that I love, Wipe Away. This card is phenomenal and is really underplayed. I even play it in my CDH deck currently, and recently won a local tournament with the card. Blue won for an instant with split second. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. So essentially, it's just a bounce spell that your opponents can't stop. One, it breaks up so many combos, because they really can't do anything about it. If they're trying to go infinite with something like Freed from the Reel, where normally they could respond to your removal by just activating the ability again, Wipe Away stops that. You can also just use this to get an annoying blocker out of the way, or maybe some stacks piece you really don't want to stick around. Being able to bounce something on some player's end step, or wait for an attack and then bounce an attacker back if it comes at you, is so flexible and so powerful, and this card is 5 cents. I'd recommend trying it out. Moving on to my second pick this month, Wizard class. A friend of mine has been playing this in a bunch of his decks, and it really puts in work. So classes, you have to level up. So for 1 blue mana, it's an enchantment that gives you no maximum hand size. It's like a spell book, it's whatever. But then for 3 mana, you draw 2 cards. Not too bad, it's just a divination. And then at the next level, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This is crazy in any kind of spell slinger, cantrip-oriented deck. You cast Brainstorm, that's 3 counters on something. You Treasure Cruise, that's 3 more counters. You can easily put 5, 6, 10 counters on a creature very quickly and hit people for so much damage. This is a great mana sink in slower grindier decks, and is way more powerful than it initially reads. And at under $3, it's pretty cheap. Defiler of Vigor is a $2 card that has put in a lot of work when my opponents play it against me. It's a 5 mana 6/6 with trample, which is already pretty good, but then it essentially turns 1 green pip per turn in permanent spells you cast into Phyrexian mana, so it can reduce the cost of stuff by 1 green. And then whenever you cast a green permanent spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So where does this go? Well, it goes in green decks that play permanents, specifically creatures. So, you know, most green decks. I love that this card gives extra utility for all of your cheap mana dorks and stuff later in the game. You cast your Defiler of Vigor, and then immediately you can cast your Elvish Mystic for 0 mana, just 2 life, and then buff your entire team. And then suddenly, that's a 7/7 with trample. This creature is a huge, massive threat and can be really, really dangerous on almost any board. If you got a green creature focused deck, which you probably do, give this one a try. Suture Priest is an obnoxious card. White and 1 for a 1/1 that says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain 1 life. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose 1 life. This card is so annoying to play against. Part of that is because these are May triggers, so if the Suture Priest player forgets them, then they lost it. So they have to be proactive in saying, hey, you lose a life. Hey, you lose a life whenever you cast a creature. So that part of it is actually kind of obnoxious, but it's also just annoying to lose a life whenever you play a creature or have a creature enter. Meaning if you flicker your board to dodge some removal, you're going to be taking damage. This card's great in a blink deck, life gain deck, and also really good against a blink deck. If you're Brago and your opponent plays this, you are not happy. Plus, it's less than $2. Trailblazer's Boots is not a new card, but it's a card that I feel like a lot of people overlook. 2 generic for an equipment that's 2 to equip, and then the equipped creature has non-basic land walk. I don't know about you, but all of my decks play a ton of non-basics. Any dual land, any utility land, and all of a sudden, equipped creature is unblockable. And with the most recent printing of this being 77 cents, if you're playing Voltron or just any commander that wants to connect for damage, this is such an easy include. It's so good. You play it on turn 2 and it just sits out there and equips whenever you're ready. It's very powerful. Light Up the Stage is a card that many modern burn players have grown to love, but I think it also has a home in Commander. So on its front, it's just red and 2, draw 2 essentially. And that's kind of fine. That's just red divination. But the fact that if you ping your opponent for 1, then this is 1 red, draw 2, which makes it so much better than divination. I know this is impulse draw, but it says until the end of your next turn, giving you plenty of time to cast the spells. Hey, if you hit 2 lands off of this, you can just play 1 this turn, and the next turn play the other land. You still got to draw 2. And this card has a dozen printings and a recent one in Ravnica Remastered. It's like 18 cents. I think it's great in a ton of red decks, especially any red deck that has reach. Not the keyword, but the ability to reach past blockers and deal damage. I was really surprised to see Drivnod Carnage Dominus sitting at like the $5 mark. I thought this card would be way more expensive. If a creature dying causes an ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it happens twice. If you've ever played with an aristocrat deck or against an aristocrat deck, you know that death triggers can be so powerful. But this card gets even better than that, because for 2 Phyrexian black, you can exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard and put an indestructible counter on it. And since that doesn't need to tap, it means on turn 5, you can just cast this, pay 4 life, exile 3 random creatures in your bin, and suddenly it's an indestructible 8/3 that doubles up death triggers. I mean, this card is awesome in any aristocrat's deck, but also as a commander itself can be really powerful. I've literally not seen a single person play this card, and I don't know why. It's only like around $5. If you need one of these, if you like these types of decks, pick one up soon, because this is a mythic from a set that is going to be leaving standard soonish, and it's going to go up in price because I think it's going to be popular in Commander. Speaking of cards I think will go up in price, Flowering of the White Tree is right there as well. White for a legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control get +2/+1 and have ward 1. Non-legendary creatures you control get +1/+1. This card is about $2 right now, but we don't know how often these Tales of Middle-earth cards are actually going to be reprinted, if we're going to get a Magic version anytime soon, and this card is pretty good in Commander. This is kind of the de facto best anthem, because not only does it just buff your tokens +1/+1, it also buffs your commander more and gives them ward. So this is great in Legends Matters decks, any go wide deck, token decks. It has a lot of really good uses, and because of that, I really do think that this one is also going to just creep up in price. Now the opposite has happened for Deepglow Skate. I remember when this used to be like 20 bucks. 4 and a blue for a 3/3 fish. When it enters the battlefield, double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. So if you're playing a +1/+1 counter deck, you can double all the counters. Or a -1/-1 counter deck, you can put all those counters on your opponent's creatures and double those too. But this doesn't just stop at +1 and -1 counters. It's any type of counter. Loyalty counters on a planeswalker? Boom, you can double those and suddenly ult a bunch of planeswalkers. Or any other weird counter that sits on a creature, like the ones on the original Myojins, you can double those up to use those abilities multiple times. After the Commander Masters reprinting, this card is less than $1 if you're playing a planeswalker deck, a +1/+1 counter deck, or any deck that really just wants more counters of any kind on the table. You should pick one up. Do keep in mind that it says any number of target permanents, not permanents or players, so it does not work for experience counters, although it would be kind of cool if it did. Last card I want to talk about is Deflecting Palm. Another modern burn card, well, at least in the sideboard. It's an instant for red and white. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, Deflecting Palm deals that much damage to that source's controller. So this is really funny if you're going to be attacked by just a big creature. You can reflect all that damage to the creature's controller, but it's not just creatures, it's any source that you choose. So if they put a ton of damage into a big fireball, you can reflect that. Or an Aether Flux Reservoir, you can bounce that back as well. This card's really funny just to reflect huge amounts of damage, and it can save you in the right moment. I love playing this card in Sunforger decks, so if you got one of those, maybe throw this in there. It's a super sweet gotcha. So those are my 10 budget picks for this month. Let me know what you think of those in the comments below, if you play any of these, if you're going to pick up any of them, and let me know some other budget cards you like in the comments below as well. Thank you so very much for watching. Subscribe for more.